Ayubowan everyone. My name is Kanchana Wickremasinghe, and today I'll be talking to you about Kubernetes, its past, its present, and what the future may hold. However, before jumping into talking about this topic, I'd like to take a brief moment to talk about a question that some of you have been asking me. Was life in IT harder before Kubernetes? As always, it starts with, it depends. In my honest opinion, life in IT, we have never had any dull moments. Over time, we have learned to automate things and maximize utilization of hypergrowth in infrastructure. We have had many challenges, many opinions. We have created solutions for those challenges. And obviously, we have continued to create challenges ourselves. And I believe Kubernetes came out of one of those challenges as well. Then in around 2013, a company known as .cloud, which is now well known as Kubernetes Inc., apologies, Docker Inc. introduced Docker, a way to package, build, deploy, and manage applications on your laptop, in production, in your own infrastructure, or in public cloud. Some of us got really hooked into the way that Docker introduced how to containerize and run applications. Of course, for some, it was bleeding edge back in 2013. So they ignored it. And obviously, maybe they're using it now, maybe ignoring it still. However, we continue to adapt it. And like myself, many of you may be doing it too. I know this is not the shortest answer for the question. Whether it is Kubernetes or another technology, it is very hard, it's extremely hard to say whether the life was easier or harder before that technology. The technologies evolve because we're finding solutions for problems. So the answer will remain, it depends. Once again, I'd like to take a brief moment to take a look at what exactly the problem that Kubernetes is trying to solve. Companies such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft had distributed applications that they had to manage at scale. So simplifying this was the challenge. Hence why technologies such as Kubernetes had led to help companies to solve these problems. Now let's take a look at some of the key problems that Kubernetes is trying to solve. Like I said briefly earlier, simplifying the container orchestration at scale. Imagine you have 2 containers to run. Yes, of course, you can easily run them on your laptop or even in production without having to have another tooling or a platform. However, now imagine that you are breaking down your monolith into microservices. Your monolith, CRM, HRM, ERP solution, or any other. You may now have hundreds, if not thousands of microservices that you need to run. These microservices will scale individually and have its own configurations, so on and so forth. So managing them at scale is a big challenge. This is what Kubernetes is trying to solve. Not only that, managing the desired state of these applications or the services. You define how much resources it needs, how it should run. All these Kubernetes will manage for you. Self-healing. For example, if a node runs out of resources, previously we have to find another node where to deploy your application. Now Kubernetes will take care of you. You just have to specify the resourcing requirements and how to run it. Managing the desired state and self-healing automatically takes care of where and how to run it. Again, auto-scaling, scale up when you're getting more traffic, scale down when there is no traffic. And in some cases, with some of the add-on on Kubernetes, you could even scale it down to 0. Service discovery, discovering services between your applications within the cluster, and now with the help of service meshes between the clusters as well. Automated rollbacks and rollouts. This is, of course, something we did before Kubernetes, but with many challenges. Kubernetes is trying to simplify these. These are some of the key problems that Kubernetes is trying to solve. Now let's take a look at the path. Where did all this begin? Back in 2003, two engineers at Google were scratching their heads, pulling their hair, figuring out how do they scale and manage their distributed applications, such as Google search engine, some of the other services that they're bringing on to Google. Back then was not known as Google Cloud, but it was purely Google infrastructure. But how do they do that? They created a system known as Borg. This was internal to Google, and then Google enhanced and created another add-on to it called Omega. At the same time, in 2014, Google wrote this as a white paper, released in public. Internally, though, at Google, they were looking at how to create a project around this white paper, now known as Kubernetes, and released to the public so that not only Google benefits, but the others benefit as well. This is the very first page of that public release back in 2014. Yes, in about a few days' time, Kubernetes will celebrate the 8th birthday. Present. What does the present hold for Kubernetes? It has become the de facto container orchestration platform. All major cloud providers, in fact, not only all major cloud providers, but even smaller players like DigitalOcean, Linode, and some others have started adapting and offering managed Kubernetes services for their customers. It has become significantly stable and secure and also scalable since the origin back in 2014. What's happening now? Major cloud providers like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Alibaba Cloud have started offering managed services. Not only they're internally adapting, but they're offering it to their customers as managed service. One very good example is Google GKE Autopilot. You don't even have to worry about upgrading into new releases, applying patches, so on and so forth. Google does that all for you. It's like Kubernetes serverless. Google takes care of all that management functionality, applying security patches, new releases. All you have to do is create it and then deploy your applications into it. As your applications grow, Google GKE Autopilot will automatically scale up and down as required. Products such as Google Anthos, AWS EKS Anywhere, is bringing the cloud experience closer to your data center. In fact, these solutions now can run within your data center, allowing you to get the same experience as running it on the public cloud. On-premise providers such as VMware, Rancher SUSE, obviously you know SUSE acquired Rancher, now it's known as Rancher SUSE. Red Hat are simplifying the deployment management of Kubernetes in your existing infrastructure. Let's take a look at some of the recent statistics. Obviously, this is slightly older given KubeCon Europe was just held. I'll talk some of the outcomes that came out of that event. But from the previous survey, 96% of the respondents said they are either evaluating or already using Kubernetes. In other words, it has already crossed the chasm. In the past 12 months, this was back in 2021, 3.9 million, or recently from the KubeCon Europe, the one that they had in Spain, they announced that more than 5 million developers, that's more than 25 to 30% of the global developer population is using Kubernetes. 67% increase since 2020. This is a significant increase compared to any other open source projects. 90% of them have leveraged managed Kubernetes. Example, Google GKE. Why? Kubernetes is getting complex, so the developers and others are leaving providers who can manage it, apply patches, apply security policies, and so on and so forth, so they can get the full benefit of Kubernetes without having to worry about how to manage it yourself. This doesn't mean, as an individual, should learn about Kubernetes, how to get to know about the underlying architecture, so on and so forth. You should still do that. However, when you're running and managing in production, be careful as to whether you want to run it yourself or whether you utilize a managed service. I have put the reference here as well, so you can go and take a look at the statistics in more detail. What does the future hold for Kubernetes? As Kelsey says, Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms. It's a better place to start, but it's not the end game. So, in my opinion, what does the future hold for Kubernetes? It will keep enhancing your experience for building your own passes. Developers may slightly move away from direct access to Kubernetes. They may not utilize kubectl as much as they used. Instead, they will utilize their passes, tools that abstract away the Kubernetes complexity. There are many that's offered today as a SaaS offering, and there are others. They are open source projects available somewhat fully, somewhat partially, but obviously that shows that people are moving away from direct access to Kubernetes and giving more simplified tooling of using and benefiting of what Kubernetes brings to you. Improve the management of security. Yes, of course, it has improved a lot, but going into future, it will enhance it further. The importance of custom resource definitions, or well known as CRDs, significantly improve this. Not only that, it becomes important as well in how we manage and deploy our applications. eBPF for managing Kubernetes networks, becoming a key now. Projects such as Cilium, Calico are adapting these, and many others as well. And even some of the cloud providers looking at how to utilize eBPF for security, and not only security, but also for things like service meshes, where you could run a service mesh without a sidecar. Of course, there is the argument about two camps, the benefits of running a sidecar versus not running a sidecar. I'll leave that for your own discretion, as in this, I'm talking about what the future holds for Kubernetes. In my opinion, Kubernetes will fade away into behind the scenes. It will still be very important. However, it may leave room for something else to come in the future. When that is, very hard to say. However, it will still be going into the next decade, an important infrastructure that we will utilize with knowing or without knowing. In concluding, this is something really hard to predict at this stage. However, some of the possibilities are simplification of application definitions, somewhat similar to what Docker and the companies around Docker came together as a standard for building and creating the Docker container or the container image, which is known as OCI. Similarly, there will be standards that will come along for the application simplification. Operating system level features to make Kubernetes management easier, or perhaps it may become part of it. I know Canonical, the company that distributes Ubuntu, creating snap packages so you could easily bring up Kubernetes clusters within the operating system itself. Rancher Desktop, for example, making it easier for you to up and running Kubernetes very easily and develop locally with Rancher Desktop. These are some of the key things that will happen in the future. Operating systems may treat your application as a first-class citizens in Kubernetes. There's the question around, do we really need virtualization to run Kubernetes? Will the operating system may even be able to run Kubernetes on bare metal with limited help of having to have virtualization? However, there are other challenges as well. How do we add another node, a physical node? There are toolings coming up in this space as well. So, future for Kubernetes looks very bright. However, direct access and direct use of Kubernetes may fade away. We will still utilize the benefits of Kubernetes going into the future. Lastly, I have laid some references for you all to take a look at. Obviously, the kubernetes.io, the homepage for Kubernetes project. There are 2 key videos, YouTube videos, I think you should take a look at. Take a moment to watch them. This talks about the Kubernetes story, people from Microsoft, Google, Red Hat, IBM, and many others contributing it to it. It's a nicely done story. You should definitely take a look at it. In case if you didn't know, Kubernetes podcast by Google is also another good resource. This is not just talk about what Google does, but it talks about what's happening in the industry. Obviously sponsored by Google, but it talks a lot about the whole ecosystem. And there are conferences happening. You can take a look at these conferences. And if you haven't heard about the Sri Lanka meetup, please do take a moment to take a look at that too. And finally, I'm very happy to say that Kubernetes Sri Lanka meetup is organizing Kubernetes Communities Days in August, and more information to come. This will be shared in social media and many other forms. So do go sign up for the Kubernetes Meetup Sri Lanka, and I hope you'll enjoy my talk as well.